Hey, welcome back to The Hook with Chris, where we get behind the scenes and thoughts of business owners and people moving the needle. Who am I? I'm Chris Weitzel, owner of Chris Seafood. Our brick and mortar location is located at 1300 Seagrave here in Woodstock, Unit 4. I bring to the table 20 years of sales experience from the finance industry and most recently in the retail sector. My wife Holly and I ran a roadside fruit and vegetable stand while also attending the Woodstock Farmers Market, selling fish and seafood. It was at these venues where we've amassed thousands of face-to-face sales. I love sales and food almost as much as I love business. We are outside today, can't believe it, in the start of March, in short sleeves, sunglasses. Leanne is an entrepreneur who has experience in plant-based foods, various areas of the travel industry, including sales, product development, business development, relationship building, and recruitment. She's a graduate from Sheridan College with a diploma in travel and tourism, which she took to heart as she traveled extensively around the world, honing her culinary skills, which I can't wait to hear about. Leanne is the owner of Greentree Kitchen, where she creates and prepares plant-based foods inspired by her worldly travels, which are available in retail sales, private caterings, and special events. From training in Peru, Colombia, Italy, Japan, to meeting Anthony Bourdain, Leanne has walked the walk. I've been supplying her with specialty mushrooms for years now. Welcome, my good friend, Chef Leanne Greentree.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to chat today. So, I'm told your cooking career started when you were young, baking with Grandma. Why don't we start with a bit of a chronological journey of your cooking, starting in New York in the early 2000s?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I did grow up. My grandma did have a massive garden at our house where she grew a lot of root vegetables, actually, a lot of potatoes and beets and carrots and those types of things. And we did eat a lot from our garden. I also did a lot of baking with her as well. Right. So I did get I did participate, I guess, in cooking when I was younger. But I guess where my passion for food really came about is I did work on cruise ships for actually a couple of years. And then when I got off cruise ships, I did live in New York City for a short period of time. And it was there that I did started working in the food industry there. When I moved back to Canada, I was probably in New York for about a year. And then I came back to Canada. I had a boyfriend at the time who was Italian, and he said to me, okay, I'm going to go back to Rome. Why don't you come with me? I ended up doing that. So I lived in Rome for about 9 months, and then in the south of Italy for a bit as well. So it was really Italy that sort of ignited my passion for food and just the ingredients and the things that they have access to there. I remember being in southern Calabria, and the oranges were right on the tree outside. The tomatoes tasted like I'd never tasted a tomato that was that wow. delicious and fresh. Yeah. And so it was just the ingredients that they use, and they do have a lot of what they call agriturismos in Italy, where it's basically a farmhouse that basically just eats off the land. So they grow everything they grow there, the animals that they have there, all their food they basically get from where they live. Right. And you can go there as a guest and eat at the restaurants, which was it just opened my mind up so much to the types of food, and I guess just the freshness and how things really are supposed to taste. I remember when I was growing up, we would have the jarred olives with the red pimento stuck in the middle. And I thought I hated olives. I really did. And
until you had a real olive.
Until I went to Italy, and I was like, this is what an olive is supposed to taste like. And now I'm obsessed with them. So, so it kind of, my passion for it did ignite there. My boyfriend at the time as well was an absolute fantastic cook. I learned a lot from him, actually, and just in the way that he cooked and the way his family cooked. So learned a lot of things from being in Italy. So that was really great. And then from there, I did come back to Canada for a bit. I ended up moving to Toronto And I was in the travel industry in Toronto, worked in hotels, the Fairmont Royal York for a little bit, and then within the travel industry as well, and different areas of the travel industry. So I did work for an adventure travel company in Toronto. And so when I worked there, I got to travel, as you mentioned, to a lot of different places. Food really became very important to me. I think when I lived in Toronto, of course, my passion was ignited in Italy, but in Toronto, when I was working in the travel industry and was able to travel to all these places and try a lot of these different foods, it was a big inspiration for me as well. And I ended up taking some culinary courses at George Brown in Toronto and just doing a lot of cooking really on the side and having a lot of dinner parties and people over to eat. And, it just sort of ignited from there. And, I think travel and food it goes together. And a lot of my travel, a lot of food and dishes that I prepare are based on travel as well. So yeah, my time in the travel industry and food really sort of, combined to make, the passion is sort of what I do now. And yeah.
So what country was it that you feel you gained probably the most inspiration from that reflects now in your dishes?
I did a lot of traveling. Well, I did do a bit of traveling in Southeast Asia. So I feel Thailand and Japan really were very, I got a lot of inspiration. I did some cooking classes when I was there, just the ingredients that they use, the flavors. One of the things that I really liked about there as well, because I did travel there after I became vegan. They don't use a lot of dairy in their food there, so they use a lot of coconut milks and things like that. So I did find it very easy to be vegan in some of those areas, especially in Thailand. Japan was also really good, just because of Buddhism, and they don't eat meat. But I found that traveling to those areas really was. It inspired a lot of the dishes that I actually do today. So,
nice.
Yeah.
What, now you mentioned vegan. When did that go? When did that start?
So
How did it start?
How did it start?
Yes.
Prior, so 2016, 17, I did some culinary courses in Toronto, and all of those were meat-based.
Right.
In 2018, January, I decided I was going to be vegetarian, and I cut meat out of my diet. Now, that was mainly, in 2018, that was because I was animal welfare was really important to me. And so that was sort of why I decided to go vegetarian. And then March 1st, I was only about three months vegetarian, and March 1st, 2018 is when I became vegan. And I decided that, again, it was mainly on animal welfare, but I think between now and then, really, there's so many other reasons why incorporating plants into your diet and more of them is beneficial. I mean, it's obviously beneficial for the environment and for your health. And so there's a lot of different reasons. There's also so many people that have intolerances to dairy and to gluten and to all of these different things. And so, I feel like the people who are enjoying the plant-based food, that the demographic people is definitely growing, or maybe they're even not vegan. They're just wanting to have really good options that don't have meat, or they're maybe wanting to eat less meat.
So it's been a journey since 2018.
2018. Yes. And I do feel that, I think before, because I was cooking with so much meat, and I did get a lot of, I had a lot of dishes that I really enjoyed not only making but eating that did have meat in them. I love a good carbonara. I love all these really great, especially Italian dishes. And I think, there was obviously it was a little bit of a transition from me cooking with a lot of meat to not cooking with meat at all. Yeah. But I did find that as such a great challenge, because I think it's a challenge I accepted, because I really wanted, and what I always try to do right now is to make a plant-based vegan dish taste just as delicious as a dish that has meat, and to have people say that they didn't even miss the meat or they didn't even miss the dairy. And so I think the challenge that it posed in the kitchen for me was, I really like that, and I still enjoy that now because it's the making things taste just as good, but without the animal products in them, and I really I really enjoy that challenge.
So what advice would you give someone who's interested in transitioning to a vegan diet and just doesn't know where to start? What would you tell them?
I mean, in terms of, in terms of transitioning, and like I said, it's not about cutting meat out totally at the beginning. If that's sort of your end goal, you can do it in stages. Like I did vegetarian and then vegan. But I think it's something where I think you can start by just maybe only having a meat dish once or twice a week instead of having it every day, which also, I mean, is definitely, it does have health benefits as well. But I think it's good for you to start there. And then there's just so much great content, on Instagram and TikTok and really all the platforms in terms of easy, quick vegan meals, because I think people are unsure of what to cook when they go vegan. It's really difficult because I feel like it's the daily preparation and cooking that kind of deters people because they just don't know what to have, I guess. So I guess there's just so much great content out there now for people who are wanting to transition to a plant-based diet.
That's interesting. So where in trying to develop and grow your small business, where does creating content and using the platforms you mentioned, how do you base that into your marketing? I really try very hard. If you do follow me on Instagram, or I'm also on Facebook, I do try to make everything look very pretty and appetizing, but also I want it to taste equally as good. So for me, like, obviously it is very important that the dish looks good, but I want it to taste good. But I think, I do use a lot of, I take my own photos with my iPhone, and I try to do some different videos and things like that. I try during the summer, I'll grow a lot of edible flowers so that I can have them incorporated into the dishes. So I think Instagram is great for, especially sharing the photos. And I do also share videos and photos the days that I deliver to Fair Square. So in the mornings when I'm preparing the foods, I'll take videos of what the dish looks like. Actually, this is actually what you're going to be getting. And so I use Instagram a lot, just because I find visually, I want people to look at it and I want to eat that. I like it to be just really pretty, the photos. So yeah. Nice. So how do you get your protein now? No meat.
This is the question that
I wanted to ask you this one because I like my meat. I have a seafood and fish store.
Yes.
And how do you go about that now?
So there are a lot of ways you can get protein. I mean, I do eat a lot of tofu, edamame, sort soy. Lentils is another great option. Chickpeas, another great option. Any sort of leafy greens, anything. Broccoli. I eat a lot of broccoli. I eat a lot of greens. And then, of course, the mushrooms we cooked with earlier, 5 regular mushrooms has 3 grams of protein in them. So there are so many ways you can get protein without animal products in it.
Right.
And, yeah.
Good. So can you share a couple of your favorite plant-based ingredients that you find are indispensable in your kitchen?
Mushrooms for sure. I eat I buy my mushrooms from Chris, and I buy a lot for myself. And mushrooms are one of the things, I think that is the reason why I don't miss meat at all. It's one of the things that I really don't miss at all. And I think it's because of that there's just so many beautiful mushrooms out there, and they can be very similar in terms of meat. You can put jerk seasoning on them. You can put chimichurri. Like there's the options are endless. So mushrooms definitely is an ingredient that I would say I use a lot, as well as I do like a lot of Thai based foods. So I do use a lot of like coconut milk and just different ingredients. Like I use a lot of ginger. Fresh ginger is another.
Curries.
Yeah,
Like
there's like a lot of like Penang curry and red Thai curries. But I do really I cook a lot with fresh ginger. So that's another ingredient that is in a lot of dishes that I do. Even if I'm just searing vegetables, I'll add a little ginger in it.
Okay.
So yeah, and tofu, obviously. You know, I do feel a lot of people are scared of tofu. They don't really know how to cook it. Maybe they've had a bad experience. They don't like the texture. If you've ever had any of my dishes, I think you could your mind could be switched because there are just so many ways you can prepare tofu that is delicious and crispy, and maybe we can do that on the next.
Well, and Holly and I have had so many of your dishes. And you've converted me on tofu. When the first time that Holly brought home a dish and it had tofu, and I'm kind of like, really? And Holly goes, okay, this is my friend. You have to give this a chance. And she's an amazing cook. You just got to try it. And I'm like, well, I'm going to try everything because that's except haggis.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you've converted me on the tofu front. But I want to ask you this one. So there's a lot of misconceptions about vegan food. What's a misconception? There was a show you had mentioned when we were talking before. Debunk some of the misconceptions about vegan food.
Yeah, I think, vegan food is not just lettuce and nibbling on carrots, and it is so much more than that. There's just so much versatility. Like vegetables can be sexy, I guess, and they can be the star of the show. And I think a lot of people think that they're going to miss out on the flavor or the meat component, but I really think if you can cook something that has that savory umami flavor in it, you're not going to miss the meat component of that. And I think the misconception that people have is that they're going to have a dish and they're not going to like it as much because it doesn't have meat in it.
Right.
But that if that dish is prepared well and it's very balanced, you're not going to miss the meat in the dish.
Right.
So I feel like that's the misconception, is that you will miss the meat, and also that vegans only eat lettuce.
Right on.
Yeah.
Gonna shift a little bit here because like a lot of our chats, a bunch of our chats have revolved around entrepreneurialism, small business in general. So like, what can you say has been your biggest challenge in either starting or growing your business?
And our love for Gary Vee.
And our love of Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yes.
Gotta throw that.
Yes.
That is actually how we did one of the times that we started to talk a lot.
Yeah.
Was talking about Gary Vee. And Gary Vee's my virtual mentor. Like, just get that out there. Thanks, Gary. Gary, I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you, man. So, all right.
I think, you said the challenges of starting a business?
The challenges of starting, but growing your business.
Okay.
Because small business, we're in the same town. Woodstock is a primarily, you could say it's the dairy capital of Canada. So we could start there, and that's got a really agricultural ties to it, blue collar ties.
Yes.
You're dealing in a niche that is still growing and developing. Tell me about some of the challenges, if any. I mean, you're growing your business. You're selling out every week at Fair Square, and
I think when I first started this, because it was during the pandemic that I actually started this business, because I was in the travel industry before, and obviously that was non-existent for a few years. The people were not traveling anywhere.
Yeah.
And so because I loved cooking, and I wanted to to try it. And I just was like, when I first started, I actually started cooking for you and Holly were my first customers. And then I did decide that, I'm going to try to put out a menu, a main dish and an appetizer, or a main dish and a dessert, and I'm going to try to sell it, and I'll get it delivered in Woodstock. And that's how I started. And so it was, I was worried at the beginning because, like you mentioned, we are in the dairy capital of Canada. Yeah. How many people are in this area are really going to be open-minded and want to try it? I didn't know it was a risk, and it was very. I guess I was very surprised to know that people were interested, even if they weren't vegan, they were interested in the dish, they were interested in the ingredients, they were interested in trying something new. And I feel like that's how, I started doing delivery, and then I partnered with Fair Square after, and so now it's in a retail store. Yeah. But yeah, when I started it, I was really worried that people were not going to be interested in the food. I was very worried about that. But it actually turned out that, and it's, I still say I would say, my biggest compliment is that when I get compliments from farmers. Right. And farmers saying to me, that dish was incredible. It was amazing. I didn't miss the meat at all. Yeah. And, and I think it's like, it's people that just really want to have good food that's interesting and different. And I do think, that there is a space for vegan food. And I think, like I said, even if people are not wanting to obviously fully move to a vegan lifestyle, but they're just wanting to eat more plants and less meat, it's such a good, the food is really good. I try really hard to make it authentic. I try really hard it's very flavor forward. I try to get all of the, when I'm cooking Thai food, I try to get all of the kaffir lime leaves and, the ginger, and I try to make the dish as authentic as possible. And most of the people that do enjoy my food, I'd probably say only 5-10% of them are actually vegan. Most of them, 90% of them, are meat eaters. They just want something different and something delicious, I guess. Yeah.
Well, that's what Holly and I use it for. We try to, we try and aim to do vegetarian twice a week, just to mix it up for variety. Yeah. And I think too, you wanted to, the other challenge too is being just one person. It is a little bit, I've grown my audience. I do private catering. I do some different events and things around town. I think it is difficult to know, I guess, when to kind of how to scale, because I do all of the, chopping. You're the one-person show. I am. I do all of the grocery, all of the markets. I do all the ingredients. I do all my Instagram. I do all of the, everything I do. So it's just kind of knowing, when you can bring somebody else in or when you can actually hire somebody. So it's kind of like the scaling. Yeah. I always find that a little difficult as a small business. Right. So we had talked about, the number one ranked restaurant in the world, 11 Madison Park. They've recently transitioned to an all vegan menu. So talk to me about whether you see this as something as simply trendy, or as you do see this as the future of, that's as fine dining as it gets, but do you see that as going forward, or is it just a trend? I feel like it's something that is going to gradually become more. There's going to be more and more restaurants, I think, that do this. And I think, if it's not about animal welfare, it's about climate change. Climate change is such a big topic right now. And I feel like people are, maybe rethinking certain things, or certain the way that they eat, basically, right? And I do think that there are going to be more plant-based restaurants coming out, or also, there are in Toronto. There's a lot more, obviously, fully plant-based restaurants, but I do see plant-based options on menus becoming more normal, and you do have restaurants now that have
a fully plant-based menu available at their restaurant, which isn't vegan. So I do feel that it is growing. And since 2018, I can tell you, between 2018 and now, the change is unbelievable. I remember when I was 2018. I mean, the reason why I drink black coffee now is because 2018, when I lived in Toronto, there was no plant-based milks were just really not an option, even at Starbucks at that time.
Right.
And I still liked coffee, so I'd go to Starbucks and I'd be like, well, I guess I'm not going to have the milk, so I guess I'll just have it black. And now, I mean, I love black coffee. I can't even go back. But the options and just the way it's just grown over the past, I guess, 6, I can't even believe it, 6 years?
6 years, yeah.
It's incredible. There's just so many more options, which I think is great. And like I said, it's not just about, I think it's, you don't like I said, you don't have to be vegan fully, but I think it's nice having the option.
Yeah.
It's always nice having an option when you go into a restaurant. And that's one of the things I struggle with is, going into a restaurant and there not being at least one plant-based option on the menu, and having to remove things from something and there's no sort of substitute for it. That's sometimes a little difficult, but it's definitely going in the right direction.
Nice. So do you ever see fast food, vegan fast food? Do you see an equivalent of a type? I hate McDonald's really, but I mean, could you ever see a fast food chain evolving?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I do. I mean, I know it depends on where you are. I do read a lot in the news, and I know in places like the UK, they have a lot more. I think they have a lot more fast food chain options, and they have Burger Kings that are completely plant-based and things like that.
Right.
But I think here, I do think it's growing. I know there's one I think there's a new chain in Toronto called Odd Burger that is a fully vegan fast food restaurant. Yeah. I do enjoy fast food burgers and things once in a while. I do think that it would be great if there were more plant-based options on the menu. I know Burger King and places like that, they do have the Impossible Whopper and things like that, which is great. Okay. I think so they do have menu items that you can have, but so
how do you go? There's the stigma attached, I guess would be the way to put it, with something like the Impossible Burger, chemicals being substituted in as opposed to, a regular burger. What do you have to say about, what do you say
the
about
processed?
Processed chemicals, things being added in.
I mean, I don't eat a lot of Impossible or Beyond Burgers. Sometimes I do.
Oh,
Sometimes
Beyond
I
Meat.
do.
That's the one I was thinking. Beyond Meat.
Yeah. I think that there's a place for them. I think when it comes to processed foods, even processed meats, right? They're not good for you. Right. And so I feel like they are sort of a specialty thing. You're having a barbecue, you want a burger, great. It's not something that, definitely, even when it comes to the plant-based options, it's not something that I would be eating every day. It's something that I would, because of the animal impact, I would choose over obviously the regular burger. But I don't think that they're necessarily good for you. No, I just think that it's just in terms of the animal welfare side of things. Obviously, I would go for the Beyond Meat burger versus obviously the regular burger. But I don't think either are necessally good for you. Right?
Did you hear that, Mara? Hot dogs every day, not good for you, honey. So I got to bring it up. I mean, you mentioned animal welfare. I keep thinking animals. You have ducks.
I do.
Tell me about your ducks.
I do. I have ducks. I got them 3 years ago. 3 of them are from 3 years ago. Okay. And then on my birthday this year, I took there was a lady that was wanting to rehome 2 of her Welsh Harlequin ducks, so I took the female. So now I have 5 ducks, and they are my babies. Along with I do have 2 dogs too, Maggie, and Sally, but I also have 5 ducks, and they are incredibly entertaining and great to have around. Yeah. And I'm doing some work with their little outdoor house this afternoon because the weather's so amazing.
Yes.
But they are, I mean, I love animals. If I could have a friend of mine want to have an animal sanctuary one day.
Yeah.
So I feel like my ducks are like the start of something much bigger.
Right on.
But yeah, they're wonderful, and they're such great pets, and just so they have such personalities, which is, I mean, you just wouldn't think, and I didn't either until I got them, and they are just, they're incredibly entertaining and just so loving. It's unbelievable.
Well, there's the self-sustainable part of it too. Like we have 3 dozen layer hens, and we get about 30 to 35 eggs a day. And you had mentioned you get your duck eggs.
Yep.
And I know you have every year you seem to be expanding your garden, growing your own vegetables, kind of taking, you know, from your grandma's seeing that at such a young age, obviously had somewhat of an impact. So I just think it's important that, you know, everybody can kind of decrease their footprint a bit. And I like the self-sustainable part of it, that you have eggs, you have at home, you have your vegetables. So
yes, I do grow a lot of foods. Like I mentioned earlier, I try to grow a lot of edible flowers for my dishes because I want them to be pretty. But I do grow during the summers. I mean, I love all of the fresh herbs in the dishes I make are from my garden. I grow a lot of tomatoes and eggplants, and I do really like spicy food. So I grow a lot of hot peppers and things like that in the garden. And then everything else, I'll get from local, like the farmer's market I go to usually in the summer as well. So I try to buy everything else that I don't grow locally. Nice.
There was just one, I want to go back to having trained all over the world. Is there any differences you've noticed being trained in the East and the West? Like you went to George Brown here, you traveled, and you said every time you go on a trip that you like to take some type of course when you're there. Can you speak to the differences between East and West?
Ooh, yes. I mean, we are I did a lot of meat cooking when I was at George Brown as well. And so, I mean, in terms of the East, they do definitely eat, in my opinion, in some cultures. I mean, Japan might not be the best one because they do eat quite a bit of meat, and obviously seafood as well. But places like, you know, Thailand and Korea, and like a lot of their food isn't a lot. I mean, some of it has meat in it, but a lot of it doesn't. I also think, you know, in terms of just the ingredients that they use a lot of, you know, fresh, like different types of spices, different types of vegetables and fruits and things like that. Like the ingredients are completely, in my opinion, they're like completely different in most every way. Even going down into South America and the cooking that I did in Peru and Colombia, like the amount of different fruits and vegetables that they have access to there that we just don't get here. The fruit juices and things are just like, it's incredible. You can get them from some specialty places here, but I mean, to have, you know, the fresh fruits and vegetables and just the varieties that they have are, it's wonderful to do those cooking classes, and I highly recommend people who are really interested in food too, when you travel, do a cooking class. It's such an interesting way to learn more about the culture, but also you can bring back what you learned and have the most like incredible dinner party with, some of the things that you learned while you were away. Really impress your friends.
Nice. That you do. So what's the message that you would like to, whether it be food sustainability, whether it be adopting a vegan lifestyle, what would be one of the messages you'd like to leave for our listeners today?
I mean, I would say it's, you know, I think, you know, just based on the way the world is today, and everyone can see the effects of climate change. And I think, you know, I was doing a class recently and they said, you know, you have 3 times a day, you have a vote with your fork on what kind of world you want to see. And maybe, you know, eating just a little bit less meat, not going completely vegan, but I think just eating mostly plants will make just a huge difference. just for the world in general. So
Right on. So where can we find you?
my food is at Fair Square in downtown Woodstock. It's right across from Museum Square. You can find my dishes there on Wednesdays. You can pre-order online. I have all my dishes are usually posted the weekend before, so Saturday or Sunday for the upcoming Wednesday dish. So you can pre-order or you can pick it up in store. I always have extras for walk-in customers that day. I also do private caterings.
Nice.
And yeah, I show up at some different food events and things like that around town. So yeah, I'm hoping to maybe do a few more, like hosting some dinners at my own house this year. I have a really great pizza oven.
I was gonna say, I didn't even mention firing up the pizza oven.
Yeah. So I'm hoping to have some people out and just enjoy the scenic country views and eat some pizza and
Nice. Well, that's awesome. I just want to say thank you, taking the time out of your busy schedule to come cook a dish with us, show us how some beautiful mushrooms can be incorporated into I forget the name.
Japanese nigiri.
So anybody, remember, I'm Chris, the owner of Chris Seafood. We have Chef Leanne Greentree with us today, and we're at 1300 Seagrave, Unit 4 here in Woodstock. And remember, we're here to make your meals hook, line, and simple.